India's fourth largest private sector bank, providing superior interest rates and the finest banking experience for NRIs. Your support inspires us to do better. Don't miss out on the opportunity. Contact Yes Bank today. Integrity is being unafraid.
Then am I to believe that your central government is using technicalities to save the same private companies who you are up in arms
Just
against?
asking the straight question.
Sir, you're avoiding my question on action on terror groups, which actually was my key question.
And not settling for a less than a straight answer.
No, don't qualify.
What would have entered the procedure of investigation?
What is this quote?
Now coming to
Integrity
read the quote. Was others
is using the power of the word.
Was Devasis no frivolous? Was CWT
Emphatically.
frivolous? Whose side is the central government on?
Distinctly.
Do you have a choice? When was the last
Incisively.
time that the BJP conducted an internal inquiry to give its president the clean check?
In the direction of
So now
truth.
that he's going to be there in the saddle for another 4 years, what does it mean for Pakistan and therefore for us?
With a clear conscience. Journalism of integrity on the News Hour, India's most watched news show. India's fourth largest private sector bank, providing superior interest rates and the finest banking experience for NRIs. Your support inspires us to do better. Don't miss out on the opportunity. Contact Yes Bank today. LIC, India's largest life insurer with 350 million customers and assets of $241 billion, is now in Singapore. LIC has set up a wholly owned subsidiary in Singapore. LIC Singapore offers innovative products to suit every need. LIC is the biggest and most trusted insurance brand in India. And now we are in Singapore for life.
Institute of South Asian Studies, Singapore. I warmly welcome you to today's discussion on India Budget 2013, the impact on Asia Pacific. Finance Minister P. Chidambaram announced India's Union Budget 2013-14 on 20th February. Before we discuss the micro and macro aspects of the India budget, there is a special presentation to give you a snapshot of the budget specifics. But first, let me invite Mr. Navi Chandra, Head International Business, Times Television Network, to introduce us to today's program. Mr. Chandra, please.
Thank you, Sitara. His Excellency Dr. Raghavan, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Times Now, I welcome all of you to this edition of the India Budget 2013 Asia Pacific Impact. As India opens its doors to the global economy, a lot of international businesses are seeking opportunities to expand their trade and business with India. Times Now, India's leading English news channel, available in 45 countries, is privileged to have today put together a distinguished panel of eminent economists, journalists, academicians and corporates to discuss the impact of the budget. May I have the privilege to welcome His Excellency Dr. Raghavan to give the opening remarks for this event. Please give a big hand, please.
Mr. J.Y. Pillai, Mr. Naveen Chandra, Head International Business, Times Television Network, Mr. Vivek Chhabra, Vice Chairman, Singapore Business Federation, Mr. Swaminathan Iyer, Chief Economist, Economic Times, Dr. S. Narayan, Visiting Research Fellow, Institute of South Asian Studies, other experts and panelists, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to most warmly felicitate the Times Television Network in Singapore for taking the initiative yet again to organize this event to analyze and discuss the details of the Indian budget, as also place it before a larger audience. I see from the audience here many familiar faces who had been here, who had been there at a similar event which was organized by the Times Television Network last year. And it is truly gratifying to see how both the scope and the nature of this event has expanded so very substantially. My own experience in Singapore over the past 3 years brings out very strongly that overseas corporate interest in the Indian economy has grown very substantially. The budget is therefore seen as a statement of the government's macroeconomic policies for the next year, and this is of obvious interest to institutions and companies that engage deeply with the Indian economy. I congratulate the Times Now network for constituting the panels so that we get the right mixture of economics, public policy and market-oriented perspectives on the Indian budget. Thank you very much for inviting me here today, and I greatly look forward to very fruitful proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Let's now put our hands together to welcome Mr. Vivek Chabra, Vice Chairman of the Singapore Business Federation SBF, to deliver the welcome address.
Thank you very much. His Excellency Dr. T.C.A. Raghavan, Mr. J.Y. Pillai, Times Television Network, Institute of South Asia Studies and other partners, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to warmly welcome you all to this event, the India Budget 2013, organized by Times Television Network, part of the Times of India Group. I personally represent the Singapore Business Federation, and within that the South Asia Business Group. Within this federation, the South Asia Business Group focuses on developing and facilitating business ties between Singapore and South Asia. Within South Asia, the key focus countries are obviously India, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh at the moment. Trade between India and Singapore has been growing quite strongly, strong double digits. India is now the 10th largest trading partner of India. Singapore and India have grown by about 30% in the last 2 years annually in terms of the trading transactions. India is also one of the key emerging markets for investment by Singaporean companies, as also by global companies who are based out of Singapore. On that note, and without further ado, I would like to thank everyone for taking time off today and look forward to a stimulating session ahead. Thank you very much.
The question is whether you should do business in India or not. And the answer is business has to be done in India. It's just a matter of time when. It is a bit difficult, but I guess the government is working towards clarifying the laws and making it easier for the foreign investor. So hopefully in times to come, it will be easy to do business in India.
I think it's the best budget that the finance minister could have given in terms of the constraints that he was facing.
Fair enough. All right. But let's have some disagreement here.
India's fourth largest private sector bank, providing superior interest rates and the finest banking experience for NRIs. Your support inspires us to do better. Don't miss out on the opportunity. Contact Yes Bank today. LIC, India's largest life insurer with 350 million customers and assets of $241 billion is now in Singapore. LIC has set up a wholly owned subsidiary in Singapore. LIC Singapore offers innovative products to suit every need. LIC is the biggest and most trusted insurance brand in India. And now we are in Singapore for life. Integrity is being unafraid.
Then am I to believe that your central government is using technicalities to save the same private companies who you are up in arms
Just
against?
asking the straight question.
Sir, you're avoiding my question on action on terror groups, which actually was my key question.
And not settling for a less than a straight answer.
No, don't qualify.
You could have entered the procedure of investigation.
What is this code?
Now coming to
Integrity
Read the code. Was Adarsh
is using the power of the word.
Was Devasis frivolous? Was CWT
Emphatically.
Whose side is the central government on?
Distinctly.
Do you have a choice? When was the last
Incisively.
time that the BJP conducted an internal inquiry to give its president the clean check?
In the direction of
So now that
truth.
he's going to be there in the saddle for another 4 years, what does it mean for Pakistan and therefore for us?
With a clear conscience. Journalism of integrity on the News Hour, India's most watched news show. LIC, India's largest life insurer with 350 million customers and assets of $241 billion is now in Singapore. LIC has set up a wholly owned subsidiary in Singapore. LIC Singapore offers innovative products to suit every need. LIC is the biggest and most trusted insurance brand in India. And now we are in Singapore for life. For the last 5 years, the biggest names, the most controversial personalities have opened up first to Arnab Goswami.
कई लोग कह रहे हैं that the BJP has lost the election even before it has started.
Country will have to decide whether we want to support vote bank politics or development politics.
What about your role as a nationalist?
I don't have any national ambition for myself. I want India to be the superpower in the world.
You fear for your life, what happens to you, your family, you've settled, Ms. Bhutto. You're willing to unsettle yourself once again.
I'm not settled, you know. Every day the phone call rings, you never know what bad news is coming.
It's going to be a tough call to say that I'm not going to play anymore.
Why will it be a tough
Because
call?
that is what I've done throughout my life.
मेरा सिर्फ इतना ही कहना है कि ये आपके टीआरपी के लिए ज्यादा नाटक मत करना।
नहीं तो
मैं तो देख लूंगा फिर।
देख लेने की मतलब क्या है?
वो देखेंगे आप आगे। ये बात ऐसी है। Of course ये threat है तो threat पकड़ लीजिए।
Frankly speaking, with Arnab Goswami on Times Now Weekends. 5 years, number 1. India's 4th largest private sector bank providing superior interest rates. And the finest banking experience for NRIs. Your support inspires us to do better. Don't miss out on the opportunity. Contact Yes Bank today.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now commence the budget special for which we all are waiting for. It's my pleasure now to invite our distinguished speaker, Mr. Swaminathan Iyer, Chief Economist and Consulting Editor with the Economic Times, to give us his insight into the India budget. He will be joined by Mr. Andy Mukherjee, Asia Economics columnist, breaking views at Thomson Reuters. Can we have you on stage, sir, please?
Thank you very much for joining us this evening for this very interesting discussion that we are going to have over the course of the next 40 minutes or so. And I'm especially thankful to Dr. Raghavan, His Excellency Dr. Raghavan, and distinguished guests present here and friends. The big picture with Swami Iyer is what we are going to discuss over the next 10 minutes. And there is no bigger picture in India than politics. So to avoid going over the same ground in two different sets of discussion, what we have decided is that for the first 10 minutes in this tete-a-tete with Swami, we are going to focus on the politics of the budget. And later, when we have the other panelists join us, then we will cover economics. So the politics of this budget, Swami. Now, you have written in your column that this budget did not give away freebies. It was not a populist budget. It was very unlike a pre-election budget. Now, how did Sonia Gandhi ever allow such a budget to go through?
Very good question. As you said, this is the last full budget that this government will present before the 2014 election. 5 years ago, Chidambaram presented a similar pre-election budget. In that, he had a 60,000 crore waiver farm loans for medium and small farmers. Right. He expanded that rural employment guarantee scheme to cover the whole country. At the end of it all, what happened? They actually won the 2009 election. So everybody said, my God, this is a proven strategy. You can buy votes, you can buy an election. So everybody expected, this time, how is he going to buy the election? And as you said, there was, for the very first time, there was no attempt to buy an election through populist giveaways. On the contrary, this is the very first time that a finance minister has got up with a straight face and saying people will vote for us if I promote economic growth and bring down inflation.
Right. Now, given enough time, Swami, I'm sure that you and I can also come up with a spreadsheet which will show FY14 fiscal deficit at 4.5%, nicely coming down from 5.2%. We can also show capital spending going up by 37% and the government's consumption spending growing only moderately by 11%. But are these assumptions realistic? I mean, can ministries really spend 37% extra capital spending?
You got it. The answer is no. I mean, any ministry struggles to increase spending by even 20%. But that's where the cushion comes in. Now, I'll tell you, partly it can be done because what they've really done is they've postponed lots of spending from March to April. So it looks as though there's a great pullback in 1 year followed by a huge expansion in the next year. Smoke and mirrors. Basically, you just put something from 1 month into the other.
And because it's all cash budgeting, so...
That's right. But over and above that, I think that is where the cushion always exists. In terms of non-planned spending like salaries, interest, cost, defense, the ability to cut in the middle of the year is not much. In the case of planned spending, it can be cut and has been cut in the past. So that is the cushion he has. It is not the best form of budgeting. It is not the best way of expenditure control, but it's the only one that he has, and that is the one that will be exercised if during the year you find that either the revenue or spending projections are going out of line.
Right. Now, Swami, we will continue our discussion when we have the other panelists, but before I let you go and to end this tete-a-tete, now you have been giving marks to Indian budgets and you've done it for how many years now? More than 10 years. How many marks out of 10 would you give this budget?
I gave this budget 7.5 out of 10. I think it's the highest mark I have given in the last 10 years. I truly believe it's an act of boldness, a huge gamble, a risky one, a courageous one, and one I think that will actually work.
Thank you very much, Swami. Can I now invite the other panelists? Please come and join me on the stage here. So I will go to Shubhda first. Now, Swami has given 7.5 out of 10 to this budget. But what is your feeling? What is the economics of this budget, and does the economics make sense?
Right, Andy. I think I'm going to fashion my views like E.T. now, give the headlines. First, I think the budget process began in September 2012. Where quite clearly the twin deficit issues were begun to getting addressed. So FDI, more importantly, diesel price correction, all these were initiated starting September. Then, of course, we had the budget announcements, and I think this process is going to continue right through the budget session, very importantly, because it's not just the budget arithmetic, but critical bills are pending in the Parliament, like land acquisition, pension, insurance, which will go a long way in correcting a lot of macroeconomic wrongs or imbalances that currently Indian economy is going through. So that is the first headline. The second headline pertains mainly to the budget arithmetic. You asked how would you rate the budget. I think it's one of the more credible budgets. We do have credible numbers on tax revenue collections. If I were to go into the nitty-gritty, we have a 13.4% growth in nominal. Compared to that, the tax revenue collections at 19% seem plausible, seem achievable.
13.4% is a projected nominal GDP growth.
Absolutely. Okay. Coming to, I'll come to the third headline later, is how much is it possible. So revenues on taxes seem more plausible.
But 500 billion rupees through privatization, I mean asset sales, not really privatization.
Exactly. I was coming to the latter part of revenues, privatization as well as the spectrum auction. So those two remain a bit of a, I wouldn't call it gamble, but they need to be monitored, and one has to be vigilant very carefully of all these other streams of revenue that the government is putting forth. As far as expenditure is concerned, I think the switch in expenditure, this exaggerated plan expenditure of 29% is more on the back of compression of 18% in the last year gone by. So quite clearly there's exaggerated growth in plan expenditure. Sure. We need to look at it from that perspective. So I think overall budget arithmetic in terms of subsidies, diesel pricing, the government has promised that they're going to be doing a frequent repricing of diesel, at least at the retail level. That should correct some of the subsidy bill that we see. Diesel subsidies are highest. So we will see some correction there. So to that extent, arithmetic is possible. So
you seem to be agreeing with Swami and his assessment of 7.5 out of 10.
I think a lot of good things in the budget. A lot of things have been factored in to kickstart investments. 15% allowance over
Right.
and above the current rate of depreciation. More importantly, I think for India, MSMEs become very important. And no MSME wants to graduate out of that segment, defined segment, because of the benefits that accrues
These are
as a
micro,
status.
small,
Medium, micro and small medium enterprises.
Okay.
I think what the clever thing that the budget has done is allowing them to enjoy those benefits 3 years, up to 3 years after they've graduated from that MSME classification or definition. More importantly, I think infrastructure, the industrial corridors, financial savings have been a biggest bane for India. We have seen gold and we have seen land savings into these two assets increasing manifold. Financial savings are a must because they impact the banking sector liquidity.
Right.
So I think there have been a lot of schemes done. Overall, the third headline, and I'll close there, is, so I would rate it maybe slightly more generous than Swami was, maybe at 8. Given that he could have been tempted to do big bang reforms. But I would like to repeat what I have been saying since the budget time, that when there is severe turbulence and strong headwinds, I think the captain of the ship and the pilot of the aircraft needs to steady the vehicle that he's driving. And only when he is steadied that he can think of taking off or speeding off. And that's exactly what Chidambaram has done. Full marks to him for that.
Right.
In terms of numbers, I think we are at a 6.1% growth, not 6.5 or 6.4 that the government seems to be looking at in terms of real GDP growth.
Right.
Inflation will remain a bit of a sticky issue. Food inflation will
How much
take
inflation
time.
there?
Overall inflation at wholesale price would still, we believe, would be around 6.5% on an average basis. What we could see is beginning of the correction of a lot of adverse macros. We are not looking at quick fire solutions, strong headline numbers. Growth will be around 6.5.
Yes.
And overall, if I were to look at the summary of it, I think it's the best budget that the finance minister could have given in terms of the constraints that he was facing.
Fair enough. All right. But let's have some disagreement here. Now, Manu. Because, Swami and Shubhda both seem to really like this budget. Manu, you don't like it as much.
No, I don't dislike the budget. I think Dr. Rao made the point absolutely correctly. Given the constraints, it is a very clever budget. My concern is it enough? I think a lot of the assumptions that go into the budget are heroic. And I think the budget number that everyone's looking at, the fiscal deficit, is held hostage to events of reasonably high probability. If you have a spike in oil prices, which is very likely because you have multiple flashpoints in the Middle East, the risk premium goes up, oil prices go up, and the budget is gone. Rupee depreciation, it's very vulnerable to that. It's very vulnerable to growth disappointing on the downside, which is also very possible.
Also, Manu, the other question people are asking is, what has this budget really changed? Where is the reform in this budget?
There is no big idea in this budget, and again, it's, you can't blame the finance minister for it. That's the political reality. But again, I come back to the issue. I mean, there were some things that had to be achieved by policy. One is to get the fiscal trajectory right, and he's done it on the assumptions he's taken, but then I'm not sure whether it's sustainable. Second thing he had to do was to address imbalances, and he's partially done that with the fiscal deficit. But again, I'm not sure whether it's going to work. And then he had to revive growth, which I think is going to be difficult to do because, as you said in the previous discussion, when the budget deficit number comes under pressure, development spending, capital spending, pro-growth spending will have to be sacrificed in order to get that sacrosanct number of the fiscal deficit on track. So it's not going to be very good for growth.
Now, Vivek, coming to you. What is in this budget for the corporate sector? There is an investment allowance. How significant is 15% investment allowance? Do you think this is going to be a game changer, or is there a game changer in the first place in this budget?
Yeah, I think the investment allowance is one of the positive moves in the budget. It's for a 2-year window, which is meant, I believe, to accelerate capital spending by the private corporates so that you can kickstart the economic growth. So that's a positive. In fact, we've been used to investment allowance for all these years. It's been restored back is a positive thing. I think the other positive from the business point of view is there's been no excise increases. And that's a very positive as well, because you're used to seeing excise duty, sales tax going up. The other positive is, I think, which everybody has talked about, but that's a big relief to corporates, is that they have managed. I mean, it was a very difficult time for the budget. There are 4 difficult issues facing the government. There's a current account deficit, fiscal deficit, slowing growth, high inflation. It's almost like in cricketing terms, you have a 300-run deficit, number 8, number 9 comes in, and Dhoni and Bhuvanesh Kumar are saving the match for the country. Now we don't know if they can win the match because execution is going to be a challenge because some of the assumptions we know are quite optimistic. But it's a great budget in that sense that corporates can feel relieved that you don't have the risk of India going back to junk status, exchange rate going to 60, which creates a big problem for imports. It also creates a problem for the country as a whole, inflation. So that's a positive. I think there is a lot of spending. The other good thing is no populist measures, which partly is limited because of the deficit that they had to maintain. I think the focus on capex is very good. The Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor, the Bangalore-Chennai corridor, these are all positives for industry. It opens up a lot of new cities, airports, ports, which will be pretty good. So that's good. And I think the one issue which has not been mentioned but which is a great advantage from the government point of view is this unique ID system. The amount of leakage that you see in the budget on all this spending, if this can be managed well, I think that itself would contribute to a significant saving in the budget. Overall, within the scheme of things, it's a super budget.
Okay, so super budget, that's your verdict. All right, Vikram, coming to you. Now, Vivek briefly mentioned the unique identification scheme. Now, that will have a role to play in direct transfer of subsidies to beneficiary accounts by the government, which is one of the things that has been talked about and has also been mentioned in the budget. Is that a game changer?
That can be a huge game changer, and that deserves a discussion in its own right. But I think the game-changing aspect of it is not here. The game-changing aspect of it is it's going to lead to something like 150 million, 200 million people opening bank accounts over the next couple of years. I mean, think of what that's going to do for financial inclusion. Think of, for the first time, people will have a bank account. They can, it gives them more clout as a consumer vis-a-vis both government services providers and private sector providers. It opens the opportunity for them to take loans. It opens the opportunity for them maybe to start investing in some small way in financial instruments. We're talking about gold, for example, being the investment of default for the poor as an inflation hedge. Well, they have no access to financial investments. They're not part of the formal financial system. I mean, this is the big game-changing aspect of Aadhaar. I think it's not so much just the delivery of subsidies. I mean, that is big, that is huge. But I think the big thing is financial empowerment for the masses. So that's my take on that.
Sure. Now, Shabda, you briefly mentioned this point and others also picked up on it, which is that financial savings. Now, these are the savings which get channeled through the banking system into investments. And financial savings have declined because households have been buying gold as an inflation hedge. Now, this budget is trying to give other alternatives. For instance, the Rajiv Gandhi equity plan.
Inflation index bond.
Inflation index bond. Now, if you would like to talk a little bit about the inflation index bonds and whether that's a smart idea for the economy at this stage.
Yes, gold appetite in India is not going to, come down. What you really need to do is how do you monetize gold? And for that you need to create products, embed some financial kind of features to gold, because gold savings are unlikely to dwindle very fast. So I think we need to think some out-of-box ideas as to how to channelize gold to make it into a productive asset for the economy. And till such time, we are going to, you look at the banking sector deposit growth, it's pretty much lower at about 12.5% or thereabouts. And your investment, credit is growing at a much faster rate. So you have liquidity issues there. So I think inflation index bonds, Rajiv Gandhi equity scheme for another 3 years, infrastructure bonds, these would probably help channelize. But Andy, one thing is very clear, that at the root of it is how quickly we are able to reverse the adverse macros.
Right.
We need to look at growth opportunities. We need to look at growth reversing the deceleration mode that it is in. We need to see anchoring of inflation expectations, and we need to see at least the beginning of addressing of current account gap and fiscal deficit. This finance minister is going to surely deliver on 4.8. Remember, he has not rolled back any of the measures except for a tiny little one from 6 to 9 LPG cooking gas cylinders. So he has a track record of not rolling back any of these measures. A lot of it rides on that confidence. So unless and until we improve our macros, even for foreign investors, they're not going to get confidence in India is not able to address inflation. And because of high inflation, the Reserve Bank of India's hands are tied. They cannot ease interest rates as aggressively as they ought to be, looking at the growth cycle currently that we are in. So I think even for a monetary policy, it becomes very important that fiscal policy both of them need to work in tandem. Sure. You can't have deviation over a period of time.
Right. I will soon be taking questions from the floor, and but before that, if I can just give an opportunity to Swami for a brief closing remark.
The final wind-up is first that the budget is just one little part of a very much larger, broader program of accelerating growth and bringing down inflation, of which other things have to be done. In particular, there are a whole lot of business rules. I mean, India is not an easy place for doing business. It comes 134th out of 183 countries. So there's a huge number of things to be done. Now, that's where the reform process is important, as much for Indian investment as it is for any foreign investors. So if we have a situation now, bit by bit, okay, let me be blunt. A large number of those very difficult rules were really put in order to be able to get kickbacks. With this huge uproar about corruption, actually a lot of that can no longer be sustained. We are going to get a cleaner set of things in which we'll also have to simplify the rules. Right now the government is going in considerable detail day after day on how do we improve the rules for increasing coal production, for increasing the ability for outsiders somehow to get into private sector to get into coal production, how do we get into expediting environmental clearance, the expansion of roads in forest areas. So on a series of these things, changing those small rules is something that has finally become a priority. That, to my mind, is going to be more important than many of these big ticket issues that come out in speeches. But at the end of it all, in the nitty-gritty, how much easier is it going to be to invest? The positive news there is this is recognized, and I said not from a point of view of foreign investment. So many Indians are saying, I would rather invest in Brazil than invest in India. So the need to focus on cleaning up your act and accelerating growth, that they are finally attending to, I find that an encouraging sign, and without that, the budget by itself will not achieve much.
Right. Now I throw the discussion open for audience questions.
The budget is like a kind of a forward statement. But how, in your analysis of past budgets, how relevant have you seen it to be as far as the execution went?
I think there have been deviations between what is projected and what is achieved. You can say that particularly on the expenditure side of the budget, and the main item being subsidies. Typically we have seen the arithmetic on subsidies deviating far significantly. But this time round, why we do believe that there is an achievement possible on subsidies is it's being backed by actions like a cash transfer of subsidy. It is on a pilot basis, likely to get extended. The second is the diesel repricing every month. I think, unless and until you see action backing a number, there is a credibility issue there. So, yes, there have been a lot of targets on disinvestment, and many a times we have underachieved on disinvestments. But if government is very serious in its resolve, for instance, if it is targeted a 55,000 crore on disinvestment this year, and if it starts well early in the fiscal year, starting April to June quarter, I think there would be some, sense of belief that, yes, the government is trying to. So you have to marry the actions with the numbers.
And with that, I would like to thank all the panelists on this macro panel for their time. Thank
you. Yes, I found it very interesting. It was very insightful, and the distinguished guests and all that were very informative. They're very forthcoming, and I think it gave us a very clear perspective of how it will affect our Singapore investors probably.
Purely from a regional investor's perspective, how do you think the budget fares?
India's fourth largest private sector bank providing superior interest rates and the finest banking experience for NRIs. Your support inspires us to do better. Don't miss out on the opportunity. Contact Yes Bank today. Integrity is being unafraid.
Then am I to believe that your central government is using technicalities to save the same private companies who you are up in arms
Just
against?
asking the straight question.
Sir, you're avoiding my question on action on terror groups, which actually was my key question.
And not settling for a less than a straight answer.
No, don't qualify. You could have entered the procedure of investigation. What is this code? Now coming to
Integrity
read the code. Was Adarsh
is using the power of the word.
Was Devasis frivolous? Was CWT
Emphatically.
Whose side is the central government on?
Distinctly.
Do you have a choice? When was the last time that the BJP conducted an internal inquiry to give its president the clean check?
In the direction of
So
truth.
now that he's going to be there in the saddle for another 4 years, what does it mean for Pakistan and therefore for us?
With a clear conscience. Journalism of integrity on the News Hour, India's most watched news show. India's fourth largest private sector bank providing superior interest rates and the finest banking experience for NRIs. Your support inspires us to do better. Don't miss out on the opportunity. Contact Yes Bank today. LIC, India's largest life insurer with 350 million customers and assets of $241 billion is now in Singapore. LIC has set up a wholly owned subsidiary in Singapore. LIC Singapore offers innovative products to suit every need. LIC is the biggest and most trusted insurance brand in India. And now we are in Singapore for life.
A budget scoring high on marks and ending with the lesson that India remains a very difficult place for doing business as far as Indian industry houses are concerned by their own submission. So maybe let's start from that and look at what the budget could have done, what the budget has actually done, and what it might have left behind for future thoughts. And if I could kind of begin with Dudley on my left, and I assume that the left will come up with the right view for once. Dudley, we are here sitting in Southeast Asia, in Asia Pacific. We don't expect India's finance minister to prepare a budget keeping the Asia Pacific in mind. It would be unfair on his part. It would not be a rational expectation. But having said that, when Mr. Chidambaram goes into preparation of a budget, or for that matter, any finance minister today from a country like India does prepare a budget, he would, of course, have a global perspective in his mind. And from a global perspective, the most important stakeholder would be the investors. And there's very little point in denying that India's connection with the Asia Pacific and the rest of the region have enlarged to an extent that Asia Pacific investors are particularly keen on looking at India, simply because there are many factors which seduce foreign investors, and India surely has one of those factors going for it, which is a very large market with around 400 million middle class. Now, from that point of view, and purely from a regional investor's perspective, how do you think the budget fares? Are you okay with a 7.5% on a 10 rating?
I believe that the budget for India was a good budget, but if I look at it from an investor's point of view, although there are some fantastic capital projects there, the Delhi-Mumbai corridor, prospect of building 8 new cities, creating industrial parks. If I was looking to invest, I would be concerned because of the global fiscal cliffs, because of money is tight and short. So what is there for me to be convinced that I should invest in India? Although I can see the opportunities, I know the government is trying to do certain things to make the economy more attractive, but what I would have liked to have seen is something different for the government, from the government, to encourage me to look away from places like Myanmar, to either keep my money here in Singapore, make it attractive to me to come into India. And that's what I believe was missing.
Thanks, Dudley. And Gagan, if I could now turn to you. We heard this in the first panel that a considerable chunk of foreign investors interested in India are actually Indian politicians round-tripping their money. Now, netting away these round-trippers, there would still be a small community of genuine investors interested genuinely in India as a place providing long-term future returns. Now, from their point of view, are fiscal measures announced in the budget in terms of the tax benefits and the rest of the clarifications, would you call this a satisfactory budget?
So I guess just for the benefit of all, I think the previous panel did give a very high marks to this budget, and clearly from an overall economics perspective and overall politics of the budget, it was good. Clearly from a finance minister's perspective, the fiscal consolidation, the deficit issues, what he has done is great. But when I look at, and this budget is supposed to be an Asia Pacific impact, so I want to look at it from a foreign investor's perspective. And to my mind, I think there is lots which has been left undone. For example, when the finance minister started his speech, he said that I'm at pains to state over and over again that India at present juncture does not have the choice between welcoming and spurning foreign investment. Very good. It gives me a lot of happiness, and I could feel that something is coming. And then when he announced about the tax laws, his statement was clarity in tax laws, a stable tax regime, a non-adversarial tax administration, and goes on. So clearly that is very important, and while I was hearing the budget speech, I was thinking it will really bring a lot of benefits and clarity. But I'm sorry to say, at the end, whether you look at the general anti-avoidance, which was being talked about in the previous panel, in January, Finance Minister had actually given a press release and talked about acceptance of various recommendations of Shom Committee. So the expectations was that in this budget, most of them will find the way, but there is no discussion about grandfathering. Yes, I'm happy that the GAR has been deferred up to April 1, 2015, but the question is, what about grandfathering?
Yeah, I think if we shift the focus onto the Indian public sector, there's a way of getting another angle into it, and Mr. Kadiresan heads one of the largest Indian public sector organizations, the Life Insurance Corporation, working out of Singapore. So how do you look at this budget? You have been here, you have been looking at business while being based in Singapore, Indian business while being based in Singapore, and let me also add to this the fact that this is a budget which allows banks to act as insurance brokers. So how do you look at this picture in a totality?
In the totality, I would feel that it's as Dr. Swami described it, it's a good budget under the conditions. It's inclusive. It has taken care of the international rating agencies. And the point regarding tax residency, I think the government had said they will take care of the concerns after some apprehensions were raised. But there are few things I thought it makes very good sense that talking about bringing a shift in the domestic savings from commodity like gold to more growth-driven financial instruments. Government has taken a call, and they have the finance minister has announced that LIC will open offices in places where a population of 10,000 is there. That will make us more visible, vibrant, and we will have tremendous footprints across the country. That will create visible savings in terms of monetizing. And another thing that he said is modernizing the post office. All the banks will have ATMs. All these measures surely would spur domestic savings. Then infrastructure. Talking about infrastructure, the Golden Quadrilateral has been a big game changer as far as infrastructure in India is concerned. And it has been proved that wherever this Golden Quadrilateral moved, the roads, they have been a catalyst for developing the surrounding rural areas. It has been a great sense of, it has brought in prosperity. Now with the Delhi-Mumbai infrastructure corridor, industrial corridor, then you have the Mumbai Bangalore and Bangalore-Chennai. So in one shot, when all these things are connected, you will find that right from north to south is fully connected. Not only connected, it brings prosperity. It's a catalyst for developing the entire countryside across. Talking about 7 mega townships. Mega townships in the sense much bigger than Navi Mumbai. That's been planned. So you will see on one side it is the Bay of Bengal, the port. Then you have the Arabian Sea, both connected, passing through. If it's a question of Chennai, Bengaluru, it will pass through Andhra Pradesh, the backward districts of Nellore, Chittoor. All these things get connected. So it is going to be a harbinger of change. These are some things which the government has picked up from the success that the Golden Quadrilateral brought about.
Thanks, Dudley. And Gagan, before we take the questions from the floor, one of the interesting measures, and which could actually turn out to be a far-reaching measure in the long run, is the Minister's decision to set up a Tax Administration Reforms Commission. What would you expect this commission to do? What are the mandates that, let's say from your position as a tax specialist and a professional, what would you want this commission to handle?
I mean, just one thing, actually reform, bring clarity, bring certainty. And because you're asking this question, I will again pinpoint another, like one word was used somewhere saying ping pong. What government has also done in this budget is that they have suddenly said all buybacks from India will be taxable. And I want to bring this point here because in 1999, when the finance minister presented his speech, he said that I propose to amend the law to put it beyond doubt that on buyback of shares, the shareholder will not be subject to dividend tax and would only be liable to capital gains tax. And this was the statement made by the finance minister in the parliament on the house, 1999. This is the statement he made in 1999. The GAR recommendations when they came, in that also one of the recommendations was let the foreign investor decide whether they want to do dividend or they want to do buyback. Let them decide. Fair enough. But suddenly we see that now the buybacks have been made taxable. So the question is, I think foreign investors are very clear. If you are taxing us, no problem. And I think, yes, there are few foreign investors who would not want to pay tax, but foreign investors are clear. You're taxing us, no problem. But give us clarity. If we know it is taxable, we'll hedge it or we will put it there. But yes, clarity, and I think this Tax Reforms Commission, if they can give clarity, certainty, taxable, not taxable is not the point. Whether or not there is clarity and certainty is the key question here. And as per the finance minister's speech this time, he wants to make a non-adversarial environment. Hopefully next couple of years it will be much easier for foreign investors.
It will actually give me an insight, okay, that for example, we can help the SMEs who would like to invest in India. That would be very useful from what I have heard inside, that can give them a perspective of how you can invest into India with now the new budget that has just been released.
There's also this expectation from the budget to do n number of things to solve practically every problem that India has, which obviously is not possible. because there's already a black paper, the white paper on black money. There was a slip in the expression, which wasn't intentional. But beyond that white paper on the black money, which remains more or less a white paper till now, yet to become grey, probably the budget couldn't have done much.
India's fourth largest private sector bank, providing superior interest rates and the finest banking experience for NRIs. Your support inspires us to do better. Don't miss out on the opportunity. Contact Yes Bank today. LIC, India's largest life insurer with 350 million customers and assets of $241 billion is now in Singapore. LIC has set up a wholly owned subsidiary in Singapore. LIC Singapore offers innovative products to suit every need. LIC is the biggest and most trusted insurance brand in India. And now we are in Singapore for life. Integrity is being unafraid.
Then am I to believe that your central government is using technicalities to save the same private companies who you are up in arms
Just
against?
asking the straight question.
Sir, you're avoiding my question on action on terror groups, which actually was my key question.
And not settling for a less than a straight answer.
No, don't qualify.
You could have entered the procedure of investigation.
What is this code?
Now coming to
Integrity
read the code. Was others
is using the power of the word.
Was Devas's stroke frivolous? Was CWT
Emphatically.
Whose side is the central government on?
Distinctly.
Do you have a choice? When was the last time that the BJP conducted an internal inquiry to give its president the clean check?
In the direction of
truth. So now that he's going to be there in the saddle for another 4 years, what does it mean for Pakistan and therefore for us?
With a clear conscience. Journalism of integrity on the News Hour, India's most watched news show. LIC, India's largest life insurer with 350 million customers and assets of $241 billion is now in Singapore. LIC has set up a wholly owned subsidiary in Singapore. LIC Singapore offers innovative products to suit every need. LIC is the biggest and most trusted insurance brand in India. And now we are in Singapore for life. For the last 5 years, the biggest names, the most controversial personalities have opened up first to Arnab Goswami.
कई लोग कह रहे हैं that the BJP has lost the election even before it has started. Country will have to decide whether we want to support vote bank politics or development politics.
What about your role as a nationalist? I don't have any national ambition for myself. I want India to be the superpower in the world.
You fear for your life, what happens to you, your family, you've settled, Ms. Bhutto. You're willing to unsettle yourself once again.
I'm not settled, you know. Every day the phone call rings, you never know what bad news is coming.
It's going to be a tough call to say that I'm not going to play anymore.
Why will it be a tough call?
Because that is what I've done throughout my life.
मेरा सिर्फ इतना ही कहना है कि ये आपके टीआरपी के लिए ज्यादा नाटक मत करना।
नहीं तो मैं तो
देख लूंगा फिर।
देख लेने की मतलब क्या है?
वो देखेंगे आप आगे। ये बात ऐसी है। Of course, ये threat है तो threat पकड़ लीजिए।
Frankly speaking, with Arnab Goswami on Times Now Weekends. 5 years, #1. India's fourth largest private sector bank, providing superior interest rates and the finest banking experience for NRIs. Your support inspires us to do better. Don't miss out on the opportunity. Contact Yes Bank today.
So on clarity and certainty, that's the final call that we take from Gagan, and it's now my pleasure to open up the floor to the questions. We stick to the rules that were there in the earlier session. Do identify yourself and specify the panelist you want to ask your question to. Yes, sir, please.
I need your views on the missing real estate regulator in India. Today consumers are suffering, whether it's a grade builder or a C grade builder. Across India, builders take the consumer for task. They take money, they don't refund. There is no real estate regulator. Besides, so much of demand is there. Besides this, Is it because of the black money of politicians which is there in the real estate sector, or something else? I want to...
Are you wondering about the absence of a real estate regulator? You want a regulator to be there in India? Okay.
Yeah, I need an...
We'll have the panel coming in on this. Mr. Kadariasan, any thoughts on a real estate regulator in India?
So far none. We have a body known as CREDI, but that's a informal kind of a setup, but doesn't really...
But I think what our friend wants to know is that do we actually need such a body? Are we in the process of setting up something like that?
Nothing in the near future as far as I know, but then there is a dire need to have such a thing because of the notorious delays and possibly defaults that have happened in the construction sector. There is a crying need to have this, as well as about land holding, ownership, title verification, all those things.
Well, maybe one thought is that, you know, whenever we talk about problems in India, we tend to think that regulators will solve all the problems. We have had regulators. Regulators have had their own problems themselves, so the problems have not necessarily gone away. Maybe the old ones have been replaced by the new ones. But, well, on that note, the next question, please. Yes, sir.
Address on the macro level, the corruption thing, if the black money thing about a couple of years back, a lot of things were going on, whether it will be coming back and some policy will be coming up. But the minister, as of now, was totally silent in this budget. And how much confidence, because once if corruption is hold on or put a break, somewhere down the line, the policy and governance will be strong and indirectly will be giving a lot of confidence and faith to particularly to the foreign investors.
Gagan, would you like to take a shot at that?
Actually, I'm a tax professional. I don't go into corruption. But having said that,
not directly, you mean?
I think it's something which has not been addressed clearly, and I don't see it to be going away so soon. Yes, it's a game which has to be played over the years, and I think, as has been said by the previous panel, not my comment, there is too much of embedded politicians and whatever black money there, which is round-tripped or whatever. No comments from my side on that. But I would clearly say that yes, something needs to be done. Strong measures need to be brought in, which have not been done. So from my perspective, yes, there was nothing, zero in there. Yeah.
If I could add to that, probably there's also this expectation from the budget to do many number of things to solve practically every problem that India has, which obviously is not possible because there's already a the white paper on black money. There was a slip in the expression, which wasn't intentional. But beyond that white paper on the black money, which remains more or less a white paper till now, yet to become grey, probably the budget couldn't have done much, and this was a follow-up from the earlier budget last year.
If I could perhaps just add to that, I think one of the problems is the British left you a very bureaucratic structure, and I'm not guilty for that, but I hope, because I'm rather outnumbered here today. But I think one of the things that has to happen is, and has happened in the UK and is happening slowly around the world, I think the civil service and the structures that are used need to be modernised. Therefore, things like transparency, accountability, which obviously everybody needs for all sorts of public money, can actually then be measured, and then you can start to cut down on certain black economy issues and under the table money. And I think once that starts, which the budget is not really there to address, maybe that's something that the Congress will think about and bring in papers over the next year or so before the next election to show that, you know, we are very keen, we're open for business, and I think that would be very attractive to foreign investors.
Thirdly, we might need the British to show us the way again on that. I see two hands, and these two have to be the two last questions because we have 3 minutes left. I'm so sorry. I'll go by the distance. The furthest one first, please. Yes, sir.
Good evening, the panel. I'm Ron Tan from Singapore. I have two quick questions. One is, how does the Indian budget benefit Singapore? The second question is, what is the debt, Indian debt against the ratio against GDP? Thank you.
Well, how does the Indian budget benefit Singapore? Maybe, Kagan?
I mean, India budget benefits Singapore. I think the India-Singapore treaty anyways benefits Singapore. That's on one aspect, which is a very broad tax level aspect. But otherwise the relation, which is social or political relation between the two countries, is very high. The comprehensive economic cooperation agreement signed between Singapore and India has increased trade manifold. The relationship is at all-time high, and I think the investors from Singapore are going more and more towards India. In the last, I mean, I have been in the profession for 19 years, but in the last 4 years, what I have seen in terms of trade flows between India and Singapore has increased tremendously because of that confidence through SICA or other measures, which the governments have done. On the second question.
On the second question, I don't know if Mr. Kadresan or Dudley would have a number to say. I mean, my guess is that the Indian debt GDP ratio is pretty high, but almost 90% of it is actually internal debt. So the exact number, Shubda, you might have a guess?
Somewhere around 58. I have to
58, but I am sure the economic survey, which is placed before the budget and available on the same website as the Indian budget, would give you the right answer. On that note, I have the pleasure of drawing this discussion to a close. Thank you so much, Mr. Kadresan. Thanks, Dudley. Thanks a lot, Dudley. Thank you.